for those who are politically wise, a show about the lives of Christians in Ohio involved with politics. Introducing your host, Reverend Thomas Wise.
Greetings, my fellow patriots, saints, and sinners. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. At the end of the show, there will be a blessing. Don't miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor. If you want to email me, you may do so at politically.wise@gmail.com. Please like us on our Facebook page, Politically Wise. The opinions and statements on this show belong to those who give them. The rest of the show belongs to Thomas Wise Words, all rights reserved. Hello, my listeners. This is Reverend Thomas Wise, and this is the show called Politically Wise. I have a very special guest for you to listen to today. Sir, would you introduce yourself and tell my listeners who you are and what is new about you?
Well, Thomas, first, thanks for having me on this morning. My name is Nathan Estruth. E as in Edward, S as in Sam, Truth as in to tell the truth. And I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of Ohio. I'm on a ticket with Mary Taylor, who is the current Lieutenant Governor running for governor. So it's the Taylor-Estruth ticket for governor and Lieutenant Governor of Ohio. We are running in the Republican primary, which is held in about 6 days on Tuesday, May 8th. And I have never run for office before. It's a first-time out candidate, and it's a statewide race, obviously, as Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, so much is new with the Estruth family. I stepped away from 26 years at Procter & Gamble, where I helped create new businesses and build brands and create jobs. And, I've been involved in supporting candidates in the public square that were Christian conservatives, often winsome champions for God's truth in the public square, but never had the opportunity to do it myself. So yes, much is new for the Estruths in 2018.
But you have a background in working in politics. Didn't you do some time in Washington?
I did. When I was a younger man in college and just out of college, I had the privilege to intern in the Reagan White House in 1988, and I worked for Jack Kemp when he was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in his office of speechwriting after that. And Jack Kemp is the one who sent me to Ohio. He asked me if I would go work for a leader named Ken Blackwell, who heralds from Cincinnati, and so that was my ticket to Ohio and to Cincinnati. I came in 1990 to work for Ken, and after that I interviewed and got a job at P&G, met my bride-to-be, who I've now been married to, Madonna, for the last, it'll be 26 years this month. So it's been quite a journey. We have 4 kids, and ages 15 to 21. So yes, I was involved in politics, and even along the way, had the privilege while I was an officer and a vice president at P&G, I also was asked to serve on the board of the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a global Christian legal organization that really stands to defend Christians and pastors and churches, religious freedom, rights of conscience, life, and family, marriage. And so I've certainly been in these battles to defend God's truth, just not as a candidate before.
And the burning question that's on everybody's lip, tell us about your dog.
Well, that's a sad story, and you guys, I guess publicly would be the first ones to break it. Our dog's name is Maggie, and she's been with us for about 9 years. Maggie, unfortunately, died last week, so we don't have a dog anymore. We had her for the first 4 months of the campaign, so it's the first time our kids have had to lose a dog like that, and so it was a sad week last week for all of us. But she was a delightful rescue dog that we picked up almost 10 years ago now. So, and she heralded after Margaret Thatcher. So that's why she was called Maggie.
Did you ever have a chance to meet Margaret Thatcher when you were in the Reagan White House?
I never did. No, that would have been a delight, but no, I never had that opportunity.
So the question is then, how in politics oftentimes, how do you handle the good days and the bad days?
Thomas, when we stepped into this, as you referenced, we didn't do so naively. We weren't looking to run for office. We had no plans that I would step in. In fact, anything but that. I had been approached many times by folks that knew me, knew the things that I had done, knew some of the leaders that I had helped come alongside and get elected, or come alongside and just continue in relationships of accountability with them once they're in office. And many of them had said, hey, you should run for office. And honestly, I did not feel called to do so. But my wife and I were asked by Mary Taylor to join this ticket late in 2017, the week right before Christmas. And much to our surprise, and we were dismissive, we laughed it off, honestly. And when Mary Taylor persisted, my wife kind of nudged me and said, I don't want to do this and you don't want to do this, but we probably ought to at least pray about it, don't you think? And, yes, dear, I guess you're probably right about that. And, we asked 6 couples who have known us for over 10 years to pray with us. And to pray quickly, Mary had to make a quick decision, and she had others on her list. And we asked them individually to pray, and then they came back and spoke into our lives what they were hearing from God. And the basic message that my wife and I and those couples received was, don't be dismissive of what God may be asking you to do, and be open. And so we went further, and we went through a process, and that ended in us obviously deciding to step away from a job and a career that we had no plans to step away from. But we did it with the utmost confidence that God was calling us to do this at this time. And the absolute understanding that didn't mean he was calling us to win. It just meant that he was asking us to change seats in the battle and to step into this arena. And so we claimed 2 verses as a couple when we stepped in and went through that process. Hebrews 13:6, my strength comes from the Lord. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? And Daniel 2:14, which I had heard spoken of by a different leader on a national basis that's a dear friend. And basically it is Daniel's response when the palace guards are sent to round up the wise men and kill them at the instruction of the king. And Daniel, it says, responded to them with wisdom and tact. And so our prayer has been that those verses would sustain us and guide us, and indeed it's been true. So this has been a wild campaign. We knew it would be rough. We had no idea that it would be this rough, this shameless in terms of some of the things that are said and done. Whether it's a good day or a bad day, whether we won the day or lost the day, because there's constant news stories and advertising and unfortunately no debates, but you try and debate the issues, and we could end each day, and I say this just with straight out honesty, knowing that we as a couple were united and that we were where God wanted us to be, and that he was making a way for us and giving us a broader stage and platform to talk about his truths and to not shy away. And so as long as we don't shy away, then God was in it, and we were bringing him glory, and that was all we needed to know, because honestly, we didn't step into this race knowing or thinking we would win. It was a long shot race. We were 35 points down in January when we stepped in. And but we did step in out of obedience. And so that just kind of step by step, knowing that God had clearly made a way for us to do this, has sustained us, no matter good day or bad.
As you travel across Ohio, talking to all these groups and people, what's the one thing that maybe God has impressed upon you that you had not seen before?
Well, I'll give you two reactions that just insights that have touched my heart. One is there are so many faithful believers in the Lord Jesus Christ that are engaged in our political process, and that are engaged because they know God has called them to be engaged at what other level, whether it's knocking on doors or running for a local office or even a job or a county central committee for a party like a Republican Party. But there are just good men and women that are trying to stand for God's truths, defending life, protecting the unborn, standing for families and marriage, caring about how their kids are raised. And I have just had the incredible blessing of having so many people pray for me and my family. And that has at times been overwhelming, honestly. It's sometimes hard to talk about. And so I think that has been a great encouragement. I guess I didn't know what to expect, but I've been surprised. And how many people, even when they haven't met me, but they get me on the phone, can I just pray for you? And so that's been a blessing. The other thing is it matters that the church show up as the church in every domain of life. And I would say as I travel the state, there are areas in the state of Ohio where men and women of faith who love the Lord have come together across denominational lines and found ways to join arms and work together in battles where they're making a difference. I've been blown away. Northwest Ohio has got it together. They are working, and God is working amongst his people in Northwest Ohio, in the Toledo and the Bowling Green and the Perrysburg areas. They are committed to shutting that abortion clinic down, and by God's grace have almost done so, and it's kind of on its last teetering legs right now. But and that includes across evangelical, Catholic, denominational lines, folks coming together to stand for the truths of the Word. And when you see that, and these are not politicians, these are folks in the pews, these are pastors. This is leaders within the church and within the community that have just stepped up to say we have to end it. We have to stand for our community. And it makes a huge difference. And so I've always been a believer that, to truly be salt and light as we're called to be, it's in every domain of life. And so whether it's in business, where I've had the opportunity to do that for 26 plus years, whether it's in politics, whether it's in athletics or a nonprofit or a ministry that you serve, whether it's in entertainment, wherever God has called you and placed you at this time, the church being the church and standing up for these truths and looking for allies that believe the same thing to really be a testimony to their community matters. And so I point to Northwest Ohio as an example of that. I many times have wished, wish we had the resources and the networks in other parts of the state that I've seen in Northwest Ohio.
So you're running for lieutenant governor with Mary Taylor, what do you see yourself bringing to the table in her administration? What kind of job? I mean, like Mary Taylor, when she was elected as lieutenant governor, she took over, I think, as insurance commissioner and worked in the.
That's right.
And
yes,
so, what area would you? Oftentimes, people have to wear more than one hat, and something you're quite used to doing in the corporate world. So, what areas would you like to work in once you get to Columbus?
Yes, well, thank you for asking that. First and foremost, the Constitution of Ohio has one responsibility for the lieutenant governor role, and that's being a heartbeat away. That's it. There's no other constitutional or statutory authority for the lieutenant governor. So when Mary raised her hand and went to sign up to be insurance commissioner when she was elected lieutenant governor, it was really to be the tip of the spear in fighting what was coming down at that time in 2011 of the Obamacare rollout and mandates. And so that's why she raised her hand. Now, she's an accountant, and so being insurance commissioner was right up her alley after having just been auditor of the state. And she had a passion for doing her best to protect the people of Ohio from the worst elements of Obamacare as much as you could at a state level. She prevented the build-out of the statewide Obamacare exchange, for instance, saved the taxpayers of Ohio $40 million in doing so. So for me, what Mary and I have talked is this would be a different kind of partnership. Traditionally, the governor has appointed the lieutenant governor, like Mary, to run a department, whether it's the insurance department or other departments. And what Mary has said she'd like me to do, and really what she was looking for in a running mate and how she landed on me, is she wanted, a Christian businessman who was a conservative like her to step out of the private sector and join her. And as we've gotten to know each other and talk about policies and understand kind of her vision and the vision that Madonna and I have around the things we'd like to see and get done, Mary has said that, one, she sees me as her COO, right, her chief operating officer of the state, and she would like me to lead an economic development and jobs council because of the private sector experience that I've had, not only as an officer in a Fortune 20 company with Procter & Gamble, but as one who also did startup companies and partnered with entrepreneurs as part of the work that I did. And so I've seen small company, I've seen big company, and I see some of the challenges and can talk the language that business people around the state are struggling with. And so that Jobs Council and economic development effort would really roll up not only tax and regulatory policy, taking the Common Sense Initiative that Mary also ran as Lieutenant Governor that revised or rolled back over 7,500 regulations in the state of Ohio, but taking that across all departments in the state. But also roll in the education policies that we want to bring, which is to end Common Core and send back control and decisions to the local level, to parents and local school districts. And finally, the addiction policies and the programs that Mary wants to bring that are indeed small government programs, but enable the faith-based nonprofit sector and the private sector to step in and bring the solutions that are needed to really make a difference on the addiction crisis that so many individuals and families are facing in Ohio. And if we don't tackle all of those things together, we really don't have a economic development and workforce program that will be firing on all cylinders. So when we say the head of a jobs council, it really becomes tax and regulatory, education, and addiction, such that we can help heal folks, help them get clean, help them, in essence, restore hope and healing to their lives, and get them back into jobs that provide the dignity of work for individuals when they are working and productive. And so, and then a strong vocational element to the education programs beyond the ending of Common Core that helps our young men and young women in high school and even in junior high as they look forward to realize that there are fantastic jobs available in the state of Ohio that pay quite well, that don't require college. And if you want to go to college, that's great, but this nonsense of telling everyone that they should go to college, which is really where we are today, doesn't help the kids who end up saddled with debt, nor does it help businesses. We have over 150,000 good-paying jobs available today on Ohio Means Jobs, and we don't have enough folks to fill them. And as a business leader in the city of Hamilton, where we scaled up a manufacturing company for P&G, I know that one of the hardest things to do is find good quality folks that will take and pass a drug test in the state of Ohio. So wrapping all those things in, that's a monumental task. It requires a lot of different folks to do it. But if God's will is that we're in the governor's mansion, then that's what I would be asked to do.
How do you foresee the church having a more of an active role in Columbus in terms of the governor's mansion?
Thank you for asking that question, Thomas. You know, one of the things that Mary and I have engaged with pastors around the state is that we would have a council of evangelical pastors that would meet with us regularly behind the scenes for prayer and for advice on what they're seeing from their people. That has not been done except for an occasional photo op for the last really 2 decades or more in Ohio, and it's something that we believe would be the right place to start. I think we'd also envision that same kind of approach in partnering with the state legislature and pastors and Christians that would want to come together and pray with their legislators and with the governor and lieutenant governor for the direction and the care of the state. Beyond that, I don't say that lightly, but in addition to that, I think it's so important that we are making Christians aware earlier and really using the bully pulpit of the lieutenant governor's office to make folks aware of some of the good and bad legislation that is being considered in the State House, such that pastors are talking and people are rallying to speak up early on these issues. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is a bill in the state legislature, HB 160, which is a sexual orientation gender identity bill. And this bill is being pushed by the business community and advanced by Republican legislators in our state capitol. And it is exactly the kind of bill and law, if it were to be passed, that has been used elsewhere in the United States to attack Christian business owners and pastors and churches. And it really is something where if you're running a shelter, a homeless shelter for abused women, and a man shows up and says that he's a woman, you can't turn him down or the state will shut you down. If you're a florist and you don't want to make a bouquet for a client that says they are celebrating their homosexual wedding, then you are put out of business with fines and actions saying you have discriminated. And I think many folks hopefully are aware of some of these cases. Arlene's Flowers is exactly that situation, where a florist in Washington State has been basically shut down, even though she had willingly served that client and knew that he was a homosexual man, and it served him for many years, but she just couldn't cross the line of her faith to celebrate gay marriage. And similarly, we have a situation in Kentucky right nearby where a print shop owner, was asked to make shirts for the Gay Pride Parade, and respectfully turned them down, and is now being sued and at risk of losing his business. So Christians need to know that these things are happening and coming at them now. It's not a theoretical 2 years from now or 5 years from now. It's now. And we see it happening in our nation, and we need to be aware, and we need to be calling our legislators and showing up in Columbus. And so, as with Nathan Estruth and Mary Taylor as Lieutenant Governor and Governor, respectfully, what you would have is kind of an early warning call to Christians across the state to be aware of these things and to be engaged. And that would be our desire. The other good example that I was going to say is, Mary and I have been very clear. We would call for the passage of the heartbeat bill, and we would sign it, and rather than veto it as our current governor did. One of the pastors that has been instrumental, Pastor J.C. Church, in helping us statewide, had said when the governor vetoed that bill, he took that pen and he stuck it in the hearts of 20,000 unborn babies. And we desperately would want that bill, call for it, and ask people to rally around and pass it again so that Mary could sign it. And there's a new piece of legislation that would go even further than the heartbeat bill and ban abortions, no exceptions, from conception. And Mary co-sponsored just such a bill when she was in the State House back in 05-06. And we would also want to see that bill passed, and we would sign it because we want to create a culture of life in the state of Ohio where there is an understanding amongst our citizens that each one is created in God's image, and we will respect one another because of that, and work with one another, and that includes not only protection for the unborn, but protection for end-of-life situations as well. And Ohio is woefully inadequate on protections against the culture of death and the assisted suicide movement that is hitting other states. We're not prepared statutorily right now. So those are the types of things that Mary and I would want to see accomplished, and that it would be our hope that the church would show up as the church and help us get those things done. It's in the interest of our families, our communities, our churches, and it enables, really, I believe, the spread of the gospel and the men and women in churches across the state to be able to talk about these things with their neighbors in a winsome way. With a governor and a lieutenant governor that is doing the same from the bully pulpit of Columbus.
Well, sir, we've been talking for quite a while now. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up that I have not thought to ask you?
Well, Thomas, we're engaged in a brutal effort here for the next 6 days. So I would just ask for folks to pray if they felt led for Mary and her family, Mary Taylor and her family, and Nathan Estruth and my family, and our campaign teams, and really just would covet everyone's support and help in this. The next 6 days are critical. There's 25% undecided 6 days out statewide, and it's a dead heat. So we have closed that 35-point gap I referenced just by going around the state and doing over 170 events in 72 counties in the last 6 weeks. And so I'd ask for prayer. I'd ask for helping spread the word. And honestly, I think we then gear up for round 2 in the fall if by God's grace we are victorious on May 8th. But most importantly, I think just having people be sensitive to where God is calling you to stand for His truth, and doing so out of obedience and without fear. Back to the Hebrews 13:6 verse. So that'd be my admonition for your listeners out there, Thomas. And I really appreciate just the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and just have this dialogue and hopefully convey some hope and just some encouragement for your listeners this morning.
Thank you again, listeners. You've been talking with David Estruth, and he's running with Mary Taylor for the office of governor and lieutenant governor, respectively, and he's asking for your vote. Sir, thank you again for this time we spend together, and we are praying for God's best for you on next Tuesday.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate it.
All right, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And this is
bye-bye.
Thomas Wise, and the show is called Politically Wise. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Thank you for listening today. If you want to email me, you may do so at politically.wise@gmail.com. Please like us on our Facebook page, Politically Wise. Now, here's your blessing. Blessings based on Psalms 7, verses 1 through 17. Blessed are you when God delivers you from all who pursue you. Blessed are you when God judges his people. Blessed are you when God makes the righteous secure. Blessed are you when God is your shield and protector. Blessed are you when you sing praises to the God Most High.